Hey everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Thank you so much for joining me here. Hope you're having a great day. Let's take another look here at Bitcoin, see what's going on. I bounced off this level here, that 78.5, that 79,000 essentially is where we're at yesterday when we left off on our video. And this primary play out here ended up working out. We didn't actually see a full pullback to the 77K range, which is both good and bad. Bad for those who couldn't average in, but also great because we were able to catch some nice profits here on our Bitcoin trade, about 32%. In roughly 16 hours there, including AVAX as well. We took 30% there. Now, what we want to look at is the back-end liquidation data here and kind of see what's going on. Let's refresh this here, make sure we get the most relevant, and just recognize that there's a lot of liquidation above the price. So shorts right now have stop losses or liquidation events between 84 and 86,000. They're probably feeling the pressure right now. And it makes sense because oftentimes you retest that local high, and in most cases, you typically break through that level. But we did see a candlewick get close, but not quite to pass that lower or that local high effectively. So, and once more, that local high is roughly, just say easy round number is right around 83,000. I think it's like 83.5. We'll look on the charts to verify that, but there's more liquidation to the upside at this point and more incentive for the price to continue further up. Do I think we're going to see 90,000 this weekend? Absolutely not. No, I'd be surprised if we did. It would take some kind of fundamental catalyst that would really help push the price in that direction. Between now and then, every time there's a tariff tweet, the price pulls back, but it's recovering stronger and quicker. So I really feel like the worst is kind of over, and we're starting to shift this momentum here. Still very early to tell, but we got some pretty nice stuff on the horizon here. Let's take a quick look here at the liquidation delta. We can recognize we are still bullish. That hasn't changed much. Don't short against that is really the common theme here, or an important theme to keep until it doesn't, right? So once we see that shift in momentum, different story altogether. But between now and then, shorting into high leveraged longs doesn't really make a ton of sense because you want to hope that the market makers are going to be doing the same thing, and there's not a lot of reason for that at this point. I'll explain more so about that here in a minute. Anyways, 80,000 to 82,000 is that open interest range here. We got a lot of folks buying the 80 to 82K range, which is sensible, right? It's that lower support range. 80,000 is that significant round number. You can see the most amount of open interest at 80,000, and it's just that psychological support. So it's just kind of how that goes. That's what this little blue line is here on the charts. Now, on the daily time frame, I want to kind of just remind you here, folks. We've seen this time and time again, multiple retests of this descending trend, and essentially just a position where we still haven't broken this trend line yet. So until that trend line breaks, or we close soundly above the 50-day SMA, we need to be 85,000 or higher as a rough estimate. We're not in good shape, or we're not back on track by any stretch. So if anyone's screaming we're going to see a bull run moving forward, I think you shouldn't trust that, and I think it's a little premature to consider that. We haven't even broken above 50 on the RSI, which would be a nice solid starting point. That would likely put us in a position where we're above 83,000. So we really need to see a closure above 83 to 84K, I think, at the very least, to get that initial leg up. And I'll show you on the charts what I mean by that, because we have our local high here at roughly 83.5, if I'm not mistaken. Let's just quickly double check that here. So we did see a candle wick up here to about 83.5, but we got multiple 4-hour closures at 82,600. So 82.6 is that tentative resistance for us here that we really need to close above on the 4-hour to have like this confirming, hey, we've shifted gears a little bit here. We're starting to break this descending trend. We've broke our local high with a closure that's higher than the previous, or we haven't seen that kind of closure yet this last week's worth of trading. So there's a lot of positivity there in that sense if we were to see that. Between now and then, we are looking good on the 4-hour time frame. That's half the reason why we took that signal yesterday, just based on being in that heavy demand zone. And we can also see that we are above all moving averages. Money flow index is increasing. These are all very standard beneficial factors leading into a likely continuation higher. I do want to remind you, folks, though, we have had 13 out of 14 red weekends, basically. And what that basically just means is Saturday, Sunday, if you include both those candles, we basically closed lower on Sunday than we did close on Friday. In other words, that 2-day weekend, we've seen like 93% probability of selling pressure on the weekend. So just know that's going into it, and that there's a decent chance that we see the same situation this weekend. It doesn't mean we're going to go to zero or down to 70K range again, but it does imply that we may retest this support and demand zone. So no big deal, really. It's kind of par for the course. What goes up must come down here. Once again, pending we don't see any major fundamental catalyst. That's kind of where we're at there. I hope this made sense. All in all, at this point, though, I would say you're going to find more favorability going to the upside than you are to try to short. However, we are seeing a tentative double top. There's potential for a pullback. So this being a Friday, it's just not recommended to trade, leading into the weekend. I don't like to send signals on Fridays, even though I've done it in the past with some success. The success is less consistent. And same thing goes with taking a long on the weekend, for example. It might seem enticing, but I can tell you folks, statistically, it's going to be unfavorable to take a take a long to the metaphorical moon this weekend. Okay. All right, folks. We'll look forward to seeing the next one. Thanks again so much for being an awesome part of my life. And don't forget to comment below. Let me know what your position is here with Bitcoin. Join us over at Bitunix. Links down below for that too. They're an awesome exchange. We'll see you in the next one. Have a good one. Take care.